I would like to remind everybody that this session is recorded. We will be starting in a minute, just giving everybody some time to join in. All right. Welcome everyone to our webinar, Embracing the Future with Microsoft Copilot Readiness. This is the first of a series of monthly webinars that showcase various Microsoft technologies and how they can transform your work and life. I'm Andreas Abi Khalil, Partner and Program Manager at Ample Solutions, and your moderator for the day. Our agenda for the day is to go through Copilot Readiness and modern AI in the Microsoft world, specifically Microsoft 365. Before I hand over to today's presenter, here are some housekeeping items. The webinar is recorded and will be available on demand. Please reach out to your partner on direct contact on the team to gain access to it. For questions, please use the Q&A feature. We will dedicate time at the end of the webinar to answer them. Our featured speaker, Joseph Kalaf, is the president of Ample Solutions. He brings a wealth of experience in business development, organization building, program management, and technical support. His insights and expertise will be invaluable in understanding and leveraging Microsoft Copilot for workspace efficiency and innovation. Without further ado, Joe, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andreas. Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we will kick off this presentation. Andreas, can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Thank you. So today's webinar is going to be focused on Copilot. We're going to focus on Microsoft 365 specifically. Copilot covers quite a bit of the Microsoft stack. There's Copilot for Azure, but the idea today is understanding what it takes to be ready to go ahead and invest in Copilot within your organization, specifically on your Microsoft 365 tenant. The question that everybody has, or everybody should have, is my organization's data ready? And this is what we're going to answer today by going through this webinar, by looking at a number of pillars that you need to be focused on, and hopefully at the end of this you'll come out with a decision you need to make is, am I ready, or what else do I need to do to be ready? So prior to talking about data readiness, I just would like to quickly fly through the licensing of Copilot. Microsoft Copilot Pro. This is all information you could find on the Microsoft website. You could Google it, Bing it, and it'll pull up for you. The Microsoft Copilot Pro for $20 a month will provide you quite a bit of the Copilot capabilities. Obviously, it's not full-featured. It gets throttled. There are certain things you can't do with it. Uh, Depending on your license, you could go with Copilot for Microsoft 365. It's an annual commitment per user, and it will light up a number of Copilot features within within most of the applications and across the tenant. And if you're an E3 or an E5, obviously the pricing is still the same, but you need to buy a different license for Copilot. So let's talk through Copilot. So what is Copilot? One, first and foremost, it's based on large language models. It's what everybody has heard about, which is, the open AI, what ChatGPT uses. It's Microsoft's large language model. It leverages Microsoft Graph, and that is specifically for Microsoft 365 to access your data. It is available and it lights up in your Microsoft 365 apps, your traditional Excel, Word, PowerPoint, Outlook, OneNote. It shows up based on your license. It'll show up in your online app, your web app, and it will also show up, again, depending on your license, in your traditional Microsoft Excel, Microsoft Word clients for you to be able to leverage the power of Copilot and AI from within these applications. And finally, it is a product that actually can reach out to the internet, learn from the internet, and return data from the internet. We'll talk about that a little bit later to put your mind at ease about a lot of questions that come up when it comes to my data and the internet. But today's focus is your data. This is what's most important to most organizations that are thinking about or interested in investing in Copilot. So, what is the comprehensive approach? Security is a pillar of Copilot, compliance, privacy, and obviously responsible AI. But all these three, including the fourth, really should equal responsible AI. And for those of you that have time or enjoy readings, there is a 2024 report that came out called the RAI Transparency Report, Responsible AI Transparency Report. You could find it on the Microsoft website. It is a pretty well thought out and insightful reading about Microsoft's approach to AI, a lot of the questions that come out when we talk about AI. Are we being responsible? What are the risks? What should we be concerned about? And it will really highlight a lot of what Microsoft is doing to put some of these concerns at bay and at ease. So let's talk about the pillars that we're looking at here. In the security pillar, let's talk about data access. So today, for customers that and users that want to deploy Copilot in their M365 environment, there are a number of things that you have to think through and you have to be worried about. SharePoint, sites, libraries, Teams, channels inside of Teams, and then your traditional external sharing. How am I sharing externally? And what is my internal risk? Those are all things that you have to be thinking through, that you have to be able to know very well, because as soon as Copilot is deployed in your tenant, as soon as it has access to your environment, it is going to crawl it, index it, learn from it, what have you, and return that data to all users that have access to Copilot. The old adage of security by obscurity is no longer applicable. If you are not confident that you are secured, if you are not confident that you are providing access to data that only certain and applicable people should have access to, you need to think this through, and you need to make sure that you go back and review all of this before you deploy Copilot in your environment. How do you do this? Obviously, there are numerous ways to approach this. There are proprietary tools that professional services company like Ampio and many other Microsoft partners out there have invested in, developed internally based on their customer base that will end up and allow you to go out and uh, uh, learn the environment, investigate the environment, return things that could potentially be nefariously exposed, things that you have to be concerned about, and raise red flags for you. Governance policies. We always say that before, if you haven't invested in governance on the M365 platform, you should and you need to. It's not really optional. We don't believe that you should just go and just put data out there without thinking through what the platform will do for you. Governance policies, governance frameworks are very, very insightful and important approaches to how you mature your M365 platform, how you run the M365 platform, and how best for your users to use that M365 platform. And finally, there are third-party tools out there. I don't want to get into the specifics, but there are plenty of third-party tools, third-party OEM, ISV vendors that have invested and have a lot of experience with the M365 platform, SharePoint specifically Teams. They've expanded into OneDrive and they cover the gamut. And those are tools that you could purchase, you could license, you could embed within your environment, and you could run and build a process around those tools to ensure that you are not at risk, that to ensure that you are always protecting your data, and to ensure that your users are being careful and they're adhering to policies and access policies when it comes to your data. The biggest issue with data access, specifically when it comes to SharePoint, considering the amount of robust feature set that it provides you, what we see today is oversharing, right? There are dozens of ways to share content in SharePoint and in Teams and in OneDrive, right? Across the collaboration stack of M365. It is important. Governance should control how you overshare, and data access policies, whether it's proprietary tools or third-party tools, should provide insight into whether or not you are oversharing. When it comes to security and compliance, data protection becomes a very important conversation. Access is one, protection is the second. What is data protection? Data protection is ensuring that when I put my data out there, regardless of who has access to it, obviously we want the right people to have access to it, but even when the right people have access to it, how do I protect my data? Protecting the data involves a number of things. It's sensitive information has to be tagged and monitored properly. There has to be a life cycle around how do I keep track of my sensitive information and ensure that I'm protecting it repeatedly. It's just not a one-time deal. Labeling my data to identify what data is private, what data is confidential, what data is top secret, what data is public is very important. Um, it it provides no value for you to overprotect the data because then nobody has access to data that maybe they should have access to. And it's definitely not very thoughtful to just underprotect data because you don't want data leaks and data breaches. And finally, there's also the data loss prevention that we talk about a lot. What data should we have access to, but what data also do we need to obfuscate or protect? What data do we need to hide? And to achieve all three of these, to be able to cover these three top items in data protection, Microsoft and third-party tools, but specifically I'm talking about the Microsoft tools here, uh, are available for you. You got Defender to ensure that you're monitoring. You have Syntax to make sure that you are able to identifying, labeling, and governing your data. And then you have Purview now, which DLP, data loss prevention, rolls up into to allow you to have insight into your data, to allow you to protect your data, to allow you to obfuscate your data, and if you are in a regulatory environment, to be able to make sure that you're adhering to all these regulatory requirements for your data. So to sum it up, to add to the security and compliance piece, let's talk about also the privacy piece, and that's governance. And this is something that is essential. And what does that mean, right? So to govern your data, you have to cover the gamut. You have to be able to identify your access lifecycle. This is where Entra ID comes in. This is where your identity provider comes into play. Access lifecycle should be a very important piece of access as a whole. We talked a few slides back about accessing data. Sure, you could provide or give permissions to a document and somebody will access it. You could take that permission away, and then that person will no longer be able to access that piece of data. Fair. But we're focusing on that data set, on that data piece. We're focusing at the lowest level. But if we come back to the top level and we talk about identity, it's very important to ensure that as part of your identity or your data protection policies is that you look at Entra ID and you identify your access from an identity perspective, from a holistic perspective. What are your policies when it comes to providing identities to certain people, removing identities and disabling those identities? If we go back into the data outside of access, what are my policies when it comes to retention? I could remove or give data data access to numerous people. I could do that at will if you go and apply the what we talked about a few slides back. But even as a corporation, as an organization, having that data could potentially be a liability. And the flip side is also true. Not having that data could potentially be a liability. When it comes to data governance, are you thinking through your retention policies? Are you adhering to those retention policies? And are you applying those retention policies? And retention, if we move to the last column, has quite a bit to do with either regulatory requirements or potentially legal requirements, and finally, just organizational requirements. If they are regulatory, obviously you have to identify the data that is regulated and apply retention to it properly. If it's not regulated data, then you have to go down to the next level, which is it legally beholden for me to keep that data? And finally, does my organization, does the company as a whole have any requirements to hold on to that data? And again, the tools that could achieve that are plenty. Third-party tools are available, great third-party tools out there that you could invest in. And Microsoft still provides you very meaningful, very robust, very good tools. Again, Purview and Syntax. And in addition to potentially third-party tools, can pretty much cover all of the requirements when it comes to data governance. So the last piece of this is, if I apply everything that I have that we've talked about earlier, if I am protecting my data, if I am reviewing my access, if I'm doing all of this and I have committees that review this, if I have business processes that come in and do this often, if everything's buttoned up, I still need, at the end of the day, insights and visibility into my environment. I still need to be able to go in at will or at any given time and review whether I have things I need to button up. Where do I have holes? I need these reviews. Communication, user behavior, I need to learn that. And finally, one of the biggest things that we know is a risk is insider risk. I know we hear a lot about breaches. I think we're just all inundated with them. AT&T, all these companies, Target, whomever, they got breached. It was because somebody went into the environment, got into the tenant. But a lot of times that those breaches are because of the risk that is inherently internal. And when we talk about insider risk, it's not just necessarily that some employee went rogue and went and gave all their neighbors their username and password and access to their MFA authenticator. That's not just insider risk. Insider risk is a conglomerate of that plus user behavior. There are a lot of times that the intent of an employee, the intent of an insider is not malicious, but the behavior produces malicious activities. Um, Simple examples I would give is a user not paying attention and, let's say, approving a MFA request, right? Those are just simple scenarios that could lead to devastating outcomes. An organization must always review those, must always have insight into their user behavior, and must always have tools in place to flag these immediately when something out of the ordinary happens, when there is a delta, when there is anything that is not common to the environment. There needs to be alerts, there needs to be flags. Somebody needs to pay attention to it. It cannot be ignored. So Purview is another piece. AI Hub is a great tool. Defender, Microsoft Defender, and then Insider Risk Management. Those are all things that everybody should invest in, that you should put in place to be and build a process around them, build a repeatable model, build a team, and build a committee that is responsible for reviewing those, for acting when they see something like this happen, and for actually doing post-mortem reporting so that it could go back into what we refer to as your governance committee to ensure that things are updated accordingly, so you mitigate and you try to prevent stuff like this from happening in the future. So I'm going to play a video. This is lifted off of Microsoft. This talks a little bit about Copilot and about what it's built around. Again, it's all about the data, and I hope this video actually provides some insight into how you approach it and what we've been talking about in the previous slides. Okay, so I think after this video, or even before this video, a lot of people, including myself, a lot of us, when we don't have access to the ghost in the machine, to the sauce that makes all of this, we question, is there really a service boundary? Can I really trust that my data is not being exposed, or Microsoft or any vendor for that matter is not using my data to learn and to share it with other people? So a couple of things. There's in that video, there's talks about the service boundary. So first of all, I think I'd like to make sure I get one thing out of the way, because it's a little bit of it's a little contradictory when a few slides ago I mentioned Copilot and then the word internet, and then here we come in and we say, wait, there's a service boundary. So what does that mean? First of all, yes, if you authorize Copilot to uh, go out and pull data, or go out and push data, then it will, right? So the most important part here is that, and if you go back and read that RAI report, there is a commitment, there is a legal commitment that none of this large language model is going to expose your data, or go and grab somebody else's data so you could leverage it, unless you actually authorize it, and authorize it at certain levels, right? That's one. Two, Copilot in the M365 tenant by default is actually leveraging your tenant to learn. So it's not going out and grabbing cross-tenant data and then bringing it in and telling you this is how you should write a legal agreement based on some other individual or some other organization's tenant. There is no cross-tenant pollination. The service boundary is extremely well defined, and it's defined at the tenant level. And then at the end of the day, while it is your responsibility to protect your data, it is your responsibility to ensure that there is no access to certain data by non-authorized individual or non-authorized organizations. The LLM itself, the engine itself, is built around compliance and security, and will not expose things that are actually what we call either PII or PCI. That will never go out. That is definitely built into the sauce of Copilot and the artificial intelligence large language model. Those are things that Microsoft commits to. Those are things that they actually hold themselves accountable to. Again, if you go out and read the RAI report about responsible AI, those are things that they actually audit themselves and have third-party vendors audit them to ensure that this is always the case, and that your data is always your data, and you're not being exposed, or you're not allowing the vendor to leak your data out to another organization, or to anywhere outside of your service boundary, which is your M365 tenant. With that, I will hand it back over to our MC, Andreas.
Thank you, Joe, for the wonderful presentation. I will go ahead and share my screen. Joe, can you see my screen?
Yes, it's a blank slide so far.
Oh. Second. Is it good?
Here, yep, it just came in.
Awesome. So thank you, Joe, for the wonderful presentation. Before we jump to our Q&A section, I would like to share that all attendees can benefit from a special promotion. As you can see on the screen, we are offering a discount of 25% on our cloud assessments till the end of August. Please reach out to your provider or account executive for more details. Let's open the floor for Q&A. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature in the Teams toolbar on the top of the Teams meeting. Joe, I think we will give 5 minutes for questions. If we don't see any, we will then close it out.
Yeah, I'm keeping an eye on the people that are dropping, so we'll just hold out for a second here, and if anybody has any questions, please drop them in the Q&A pane on the right-hand side of your window.
We also have another slide regarding our upcoming webinars, so I encourage you to stay a couple of minutes so you can see what is the next monthly webinar that you can attend to.
You could, I think if we go ahead and share that now, Andreas, before a lot of people drop.
All right. So we are working on a series of monthly technical master webinars. Our next webinar would be on August 14th. It will be regarding maximizing value with Microsoft licensing, a deep dive into E3 and E5. This will provide you insight into how to better leverage your Microsoft licenses, cut unnecessary third-party costs, and streamline your tech stack for enhanced security, compliance, and efficiency in our insightful webinar. We will uncover the secrets of E3 and E5 plans, unlock hidden features, and optimize your software investments with expert guidance and real-world scenarios. Regarding the September 18th webinar, Elevating Security Maturity with Microsoft's Integrated Solutions, you will discover the transformative power of Microsoft Security Suite, where we will explore how integrated solutions like Defender, XDR, and Sentinel reshape enterprise security. As for the webinar on October 16th, modernizing business processes, embrace automation with Power Platform. You will gain strategies to automate business workflows using Microsoft Power Platform, focusing on achieving efficiency and modernization in our webinar designed to modernize business processes. All right, so I think we have a question from Brian. What do you recommend? Go ahead, John.
Yeah, Brian Webb is asking, appreciate the coverage. What do you recommend as a good first step in reviewing data from a security standpoint in preparation for adopting M365 Copilot? So the most important step is an assessment. You have to, unless you already know exactly what you have, which that would be great. I think that's a perfect scenario, perfect world. I doubt it's really happens often, but unless you know exactly what you have, how your tenant is secured, how it's broken out, it's critical that you assess the tenant. And assessing it could potentially mean two things. You either go and get all these insights to at least understand the lay of the land, and then engage the tenant owners, the champions, the stakeholders to ensure that it is all designed and secured the way it should be. And there are also baselines that you could do with assessments. The tools that I mentioned earlier, the third-party tools that we mentioned earlier, most of them provide baselines of what is a baseline security for this? What is a baseline security for that? Baselines are a good way post-assessment to compare to what you have and identify anything that should be addressed. And then finally, as I mentioned, the involvement of the business, the involvement of the owners of these objects, of that content, is critical. This is not to suggest that every person that creates a document needs to be in a room, but those owners, those delegated administrators, the people that are actually running some of the departments within a larger organizations, or people that are identified as those, need to be involved in these conversations, because they are the ones that are going to dictate and make decisions on where should there be access and whom should have access. And of course, finally, at the end of the day, IT has to be involved across the whole journey from A to Z. But IT cannot be the only uh, organization being represented when it comes to securing your data. So I would definitely suggest there are partners. We have partners that do assessments out there, and we'll be more than happy to help and support any organization that is interested in starting with an assessment of their M365 tenant for Copilot readiness.
All right, I don't believe we have any other questions. Thank you everybody for joining this webinar. Thank you, Joe, for the presentation, and I hope you have a very good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.